Okay, we'll open up the subcommittee. It's kind of a variable, mostly business and business and banking. Okay, 162. I gotta reread this bill. I just wanted to, did we have Syria in it? Yeah, it is in here. So, okay. Needless to say, I was more than ready to retain this bill, but Representative Walsh has asked me to make one more attempt to salvage it from having to keep it around. And I guess I have an amendment here in front of me. Does everybody have one of these? So why don't you tell us what you're trying to do here in this amendment?
Well, thank you for allowing this quasi-public hearing on this again and allowing me to speak. I also have two gentlemen here from Space Force who weren't able to attend at the first hearing about this. So if there's specific questions, they would be happy to answer those. For the record, I'm Representative Lily Walsh. I represent Rockingham 15, the town of Hampstead, and I'm also on this committee. So hello to my fellow committee members. And after the first public hearing, I took copious notes, and I hope that I have addressed everything that was of concern that everyone brought up, which were very valid points. And so I've given you a copy of my testimony, and I'll just quickly go over them. I know that the short-term leases were an issue for Representative Hunt and Representative Thaxton having being in that industry. So we understood that and took that out so that it's a longer term lease, so that any Airbnbs or VRBOs or bed and breakfasts where people are just staying for a weekend or a long weekend wouldn't be affected by this. So I changed the verbiage to only leases that are greater than 14 days. So that alleviates that issue. Also, I know that notarizing a document was a somewhat painful process, so we eliminated that. I worked with the Attorney General's office, and they are willing to allow electronic filings of this affidavit. So that's a big change as well. And so the notification to the DOJ has been changed to electronic filing wherever that was stated before as a notarization. The timing of the notification has been changed to 3 days for purchases and 5 days for leases. And also, we made sure to add that the lessor, seller, or agent has no obligation to personally authenticate the validity of the qualified renter or purchaser affidavit. So I know that that was an issue as to how would you know if someone is a bad person or not, or an agent for an agent. It's not up to you to know. It's just up to the lessor or the buyer to electronically file with the DOJ. And also the language has been changed in section I that remove the lease and rental agreements. So now it's just talking about purchase and sales. And obviously I changed it from lessee to lessor as well. That's the very first line. So that is why I'm requesting that the committee consider ought to pass with amendment. And I'm ready to answer any questions that I'm able to answer, or the gentleman behind me can also answer, obviously, the importance of the security of our facilities here in New Hampshire and how important that is.
Okay, go ahead.
So I appreciate your enthusiasm for attempting to protect the United States from bad actors. And I don't see that there's a whole lot of, I don't see any daylight between myself and the people that are listed here. as bad actors, except of course Syria, which is our friend as of yesterday, which takes us to a valid, in my opinion, point of international relations are outside the scope of the state of New Hampshire. We don't have that authority, and this takes us into that realm, at least slightly. And it's a problem because you've got a bill that says Syria in it, and presumably Syria is going to be our friend, and who knows about next week or next year. It would require an act of the legislature. So that's an aspect of this which I think needs to be considered, as well as my main point, which is that as a real estate practitioner, and I don't know what your familiarity is with the New Hampshire laws concerning real estate, but real estate practitioners real estate is a heavily regulated industry. People not in the business don't realize that. We are required to disclose everything from the potential for lead paint and asbestos in your home to maybe there's radon in your well water to one of 7 different ways you can be involved with a real estate agent in the state of New Hampshire. So there's more there than, yeah, I hope you have a check and we're going to buy this house. It's just not that simple. And I see that you've tried to move the burden of this over to the lessor or buyer of the property.
Mm-hmm.
However, I will tell you the story of the transfer tax affidavit that goes with every closing in New Hampshire. The burden of responsibility for filing that is with the purchaser of the property. However, when you go to closing now, they make sure that the seller signs it and provide that, because what if the buyer doesn't do it down the road? And then everybody is liable. And then where do all these things go? They go into a box, or hopefully not. Hopefully they go into an electronic file, but more than likely they go in a box someplace in Concord. I don't think that you are going to stop bad actors. Really. I don't think that we have the ability to police this. And so when I take those 2 factors into consideration, my greatest concern is the discrimination potential for individuals who legitimately have the ability to lease or purchase property in the state of New Hampshire. The gentleman who sits in front of me in the house is Russian, I think, or Romanian or something. And I couldn't tell you what he is, but if
I don't see how that affects an affidavit with leasing or purchasing. If the person is not a bad actor, they should have no problem filling this out.
So everybody who buys a house and everybody who leases a house in New Hampshire has to fill out an affidavit and file it.
Yeah.
And I think that that's burdensome and unreasonable. And I think the potential to discriminate against people because it's burdensome and unreasonable, there are far lesser things that real estate agents can lose their licenses for. If you want to buy a house in a neighborhood and you ask me where the nearest Catholic church is, I can't answer that question. If you ask me about what the best schools are in this neighborhood, I can't answer that question. That's the law. And now I'm going to have to say, well, you're Russian. Maybe, I don't know. So,
but that's not up to you. It's not
well, it's easy
putting
for
you
to,
in that position.
Well, it does.
It's,
because
no, you're not with the DOJ. You are
I'm
a
I'm
realtor.
a real estate licensee.
Right. Okay.
And as a real estate licensee,
Mm-hmm.
I'm responsible for making sure, that's the way the law is enforced,
Mm-hmm.
I'm responsible for making sure that everybody in the transaction, whether they're my customer or my client,
Mm-hmm.
is conducting themselves and doing everything within the scope of the law. I see this as a slippery slope towards discrimination on a much higher level than anything that we've been ever asked to do in this state. I mean, so for those reasons, I object to this bill.
Okay. You're entitled to your opinion.
Sure.
As I am mine.
Thank you.
there's nothing that is discriminatory, I believe, in this. They're simply filling out an affidavit. And it is up to the DOJ, which is specified in the bill, as to what happens afterwards with that electronically filled affidavit. And they take it from there. So I have specifically put in language that says that the realtor has no obligation whatsoever. The agent has no obligation to personally authenticate the validity of the qualified renter or purchaser. So with that sentence alone, I guess I'm still not following what your issue is, and I don't see that there's any discrimination whatsoever. However, I would like to invite the two gentlemen from Space Force to come up and just give an overview as to the importance of why this legislation is needed.
Can you direct me to the line where it says Realtor?
Well, agent is the same as realtor.
Can you
and
show
this-
me just tell me the line where you have it.
It is in,
18.
yep, yep,
It should be real estate licensee. Agent is,
okay.
if this was to pass, it would need to say real estate licensee if that's your intent. Because I can have agency for someone and not be a licensee. And I can be a realtor and not have a license, and I can have a license and not be a realtor. So if that's.
All right, that's
your
an
goal,
easy change. We
that's-
we can
We can certainly
definitely
agree
make
on
that.
that.
All right. You can just pull up a chair too, if you'd like.
Good morning. Thank you for taking the time to hear from us this morning. My name is David Dinwiddie. I'm the Defense Force Director at the New Boston Space Force Station. I brought with me one of my colleagues, and I'll let him introduce himself, but just a little bit of background information for those of you that aren't familiar with the New Boston Space Force Station, and I assume that that's many of you because we hear that quite often. New Boston Space Force Station is one of 8 worldwide ground stations, one of 8 worldwide ground stations that monitors Department of Defense satellites and provides the link between the users of satellites and the satellites that are off in space. We perform a critical national defense mission in New Boston, and that's often missed because we keep a pretty low profile for obvious reasons. What I would say to you is this legislation we consider critical to our mission, to protecting our mission and the national defense as a whole. The communication that we do from our installation, much of it is digital radio frequency. And so there are two aspects of this legislation that are important to us. Proximity of our adversaries is concerning to us for 2 reasons. One of those reasons is they're able to observe our operations, and when you're able to observe operations, you gain an advantage in being able to interrupt those operations. And so the physical operations that we perform at the installation in order to keep the operation that connects to the space mission can be observed through proximity. More importantly, radio frequency interference is critical to us. The closer that people are to our mission, the more easily they would be able to interrupt it. They're able to receive signal and potentially interrupt signal. The closer it is, the greater that ability is. I'm not a scientist. I'm not a person that completely understands everything connected to radio frequency. My specialty is security, homeland security, national security, physical security. And so I can certainly speak to that. That's my full-time job. I can tell you that the Department of Defense spends millions of dollars at New Boston Space Force Station on physical security, operational security, personnel security. We have a pretty large team and a large footprint, and we do a great deal to protect the mission. But we are forced to stop at the boundaries of the installation. There's not much we can do beyond the boundaries, but there is something that you all can do, and that that piece of legislation that you all are considering moving on is critical to protecting our national security. And I would urge you to consider moving it forward. And I'll allow Mr. Dickinson to introduce himself and speak as well.
Thank you. Good morning. My name's Thaddeus Dickinson. Thank you to the chairman and the committee for allowing us to have your audience today to speak on this important piece of legislation. I am the anti-terrorism program manager at New Boston Space Force Station. As my colleague stated, this is my full-time job. This is my career. It's all I do, and it's all I focus on. The Space Force Station has been around for a long time, a lot longer than our current threat. And so our threat environment has changed. And one thing that I think, in retrospect, we in the Department of Defense wish we could change is that we did not future-proof these installations. So in 1959, there was no threat like there is now. And so we just needed a piece of property on which to build a Space Force Station. So we bought 3,000 acres. And we put it as close to the road as possible because that was the cheapest way to get a car from Chestnut Hill Road to the operational area. So we have about 100 acres. That is the most critical portion of the installation. That is about 1,700 feet away from the road. We cannot move that. We cannot change it, and we cannot buy more property. So we are at the very edge. We are at our tiptoes are at the edge where our adversaries operate freely. The operational environment favors our adversary everywhere off the installation. We actually have current ongoing threats, and we have current attacks being perpetrated, the nature extent of which obviously are classified and we won't discuss here today. We need the help of our state to extend the footprint, to push our adversaries away from the installation. This is not a federal problem. This is not a Space Force problem. This is an American problem. And whether we like it or not, this is also a state of New Hampshire problem. Just because we work for the federal government does not mean that we're federal citizens. We are citizens of this state. And so by pushing our adversaries away at least 10 miles, if you were to ask me, I would have doubled that or more, as much as you could possibly give us. We can't stop them, but we can make it bad business or unproductive for them to do business in New Hampshire. And so we're never going to be able to completely stop our adversaries. But for this state, we can make them go elsewhere. We can make it so that targets in New Hampshire are difficult and unproductive. And therefore, it's not a place that they would want to operate. So if we can keep them away from our military installations, by the way, we're the only active duty military installation in the state, then they go elsewhere. And unless we can completely stop them, that's our best option right now. And so we appreciate the support of this committee in putting our national priorities above our private priorities and helping push forward this important piece of legislation. And to the extent that happens, you have our support, and we will work with you as closely as possible. Thank you so much.
You willing to take questions?
Absolutely.
Okay. Representative Burrows.
Thanks for taking my question. And I appreciate the intent of this bill. Obviously, we all share concern about terrorism, et cetera. But I'm sorry, the gentleman on the right said that, you were not a scientist. So I have two comments. One, we are not scientists. And two, I don't really fully understand why you as a federal agency, why the federal government is not intervening in this problem. Why is this a state issue of people who, again, not scientists, not technically adept in this stuff? Why is there not a federal agency stepping in to assist with this problem?
There is, in fact, ma'am, there is a federal agency. I'm sure many of you have talked about CFIUS as part of this.
You want to explain who CFIUS is? What's that mean?
So CFIUS is the Committee for Foreign Investment in the United States.
Committee for Foreign Investment. And this is when you
This
say
is a-
committee, that's a legislative committee, like House or Senate, or?
No, this is a federal organization. Off the top of my head, I couldn't tell you what branch of government that CFIUS falls under, but it's a set of regulations that requires foreign investors in the United States to file paperwork with the federal government.
So there already is some way to collect
There's
this
a-
information.
there
You
is-
don't need this if there's already a committee that's already collecting this
There's a
information.
committee at the federal level
Right.
that receives a notification when a foreign adversary is attempting to purchase land.
I think it's State Department.
I believe you're right. I believe it is part of the State Department.
Okay, so state it again, committee, when I rewrite the blurb, I want to make sure I get this right. The committee, what is it now? Committee, That-
It's the CFI.
give me this.
Excuse me. It's the Committee on Foreign Investment in the United States. sir.
Committee on
Foreign Investment in the United
In-
States.
Investment. Okay, so in this committee, has a requirement, it's a federal requirement, that anybody who isn't, let me get it right, anybody who is a natural person who is employee or agent of a foreign country of concern must report to the federal government that they're purchasing land in America.
If they report, we've actually had a discussion with the head of the CFIUS representative for the Air Force. We had a discussion about an incident that we have ongoing at New Boston Space Force Station. We actually do have adversaries occupying property very, very near us. It was his opinion that CFIUS is ineffectual in its duties and its charge because at the federal level, these investments are either not reported or the transactions are fleeting when it comes to the timeline that a federal agency would be able to respond, where often a transaction, a property has been bought and sold before CFIUS ever has a chance. It was their opinion that this legislation at the state level, being much more lean, agile, and closer to the ground, was, to quote them, a home run for our state. They cannot and do not respond in time to these transactions. to
And
prevent
how
them.
would we respond? Because at this point, all we do is someone is supposed to send a letter to the Attorney General's office, which then sticks it in a file box. So how are we responding?
First
you-
of all, I want to remind the committee that the sponsor of this bill did contact and work with Congressman Pappas's office, and Congressman Pappas's office agreed that CFIUS is to quasi quote them, I guess, a typical federal agency that is slow to move.
Well,
And
I hope
so-
Donald Trump knows about them and get rid of Dome knows how these guys are useless,
Well,
right? And that they're no good, and then
Well, the
every
point
dollar we're
is that
spending is wasted
even-
money, and
even
and that you're
Congressman
basically
Pappas's
turning to us
office
states
wanted
to-
this legislation.
pick it up?
Is where it goes with that. And they had to admit that, yes, if you do something at the state level,
Okay.
it can be much more
Please
effective.
answer my question.
Okay.
If I read this correctly,
Mm-hmm.
this person does not have to when this thing gets filed. Okay, the only answer is I am not a foreign agent, right? There's nothing in here that says I am a foreign agent, right?
Well,
they cannot. They're not.
it'll be up to the DOJ that's in the rules making as to what the affidavit specifies. Because this
Let
is
me
on
warn
the
you,
DOJ.
Attorney General does not do rules. They don't do rules. This is not a rulemaking thing. They're going to follow the letter of the statute.
Okay,
The way this letter is, all it says is not a foreign principle. Has read and understand both the prohibitions in the subdivision and penalties for violating the terms. The violating the terms is for not filing.
Right.
Okay.
Correct.
I don't know. I don't see any violation if they really were a foreign agent. I don't see that in here. You say, yeah, I am a foreign agent, and civilist knows I filed with them. I don't see that there's something in here that says, have you filed with the federal government? But normally that's what we do with in state law. We say is, have you, when you file something with the state, we say one of the first questions we have is if they're federally regulated, we'll ask you is, did you file federally?
Well, I would be happy to amend this.
It's going to need a lot of amendment. But let me understand this correctly. We spend all this time in New Hampshire protecting people from discrimination. Real estate discrimination is like the oldest statutes on the books. And so what you want us to do is to write into our statute, we're going to discriminate a person's from their nationality, which I'm pretty sure that's a violation of the discrimination law. And you,
This doesn't mean that it discriminates against people who are citizens of any of these countries, only governments and representative of the government.
I would assume that if you're a representative of the government, you're a citizen of that government. That is discrimination. You have to remember, think about this now. You are saying,
Well, not every citizen of every
So-
country is a representative of the government.
no,
There's
what
a
I'm saying
big
is,
difference between being a foreign agent who's representing a government of our adversary as opposed to being a Russian citizen,
right. Well, he could be
Chinese
just a Russian citizen. Russian citizen who might want to look favorably to his mother country and decide that he's going to stick a drone up in the air and go float it over your property or something. Okay. At the end of the day,
Then they become an agent.
then they
but
become an
just
agent.
any
And do we have
citizen-
laws against agents? Do I in this bill say it's illegal to be an agent?
I think it does say that as a matter of
Where
fact.
does
yeah.
it say that? Where does it say it's illegal?
In
All I
section,
see is
in
yeah.
section 3, foreign principal means a natural person who's an
Right,
employee
that-
or agent of a foreign country.
Right, but it doesn't say what the consequence is. What is the consequence in New Hampshire? In other words, if someone goes ahead and does this, files this, and scratches out, yes, I am a member of this country, okay, not alone whether they lie or not, okay. What is the consequence? Are we going to take the land back from them? Can we say the sale is because I read this other language in here that this does not failure to file doesn't mean that the real estate property can't be sold. I mean, I read this other section in here. This is outright discrimination simply because of a person's occupation. And I'm pretty sure that we don't allow that under our discrimination laws.
To be a foreign agent.
I've
working
never,
against
I
the
know
United
we've
States.
got the Human Rights Commission is under question, but I'm pretty doesn't sure it has anything in there about being an agent. I'm sure it says you do not discriminate based upon national origin.
I guess I don't see how this is
Okay,
discrimination.
let's see.
Salvi.
Salvi, yes, sorry. I was going to say, let him, he hasn't spoken.
Thank
yet.
you for
Yes.
taking my question and thanks for coming all the way from Boston. I feel like you already have a process in place at CFI. So we can basically strengthen that process instead of having 52 multiple process at each state, where each state will interpret in a different way. And the repercussion of that is definitely going to be altogether different, whatever you're trying to implement. So it's better to fix the federal process in place. Federal has all the right to decide like who is basically buying, to go against it. And that is the way I think it's a better efficient way rather than going at the state level and taking a chance of implementing in a different way for each state. And second follow-up question is how many states have done this?
Last I knew, it was 29 states that had enacted legislation, 29 progressive states that took a concern for their citizens. I can tell you that anybody that believes that the federal government is more efficient than the state government at anything is pretty narrow-minded. The federal government is never more efficient than the state government. I'm sorry, it just is the way it is.
Just a follow-up question. In how many years 29 state implemented this?
In how many years?
So yeah, in
I don't know. I'm sorry, I
And-
don't know that.
how many cases has been basically came out of this kind of situation? Like we identified the people who are basically buying the property with a ill intention or something like that.
Yeah, what he's saying is, since you have this law on the books, what's,
How many?
how many have actually had cases, or how many events have occurred that this law actually had an effect that you actually were able to sniff out or get someone to claim that they were a foreign agent? I mean, it looks to me like that every foreign agent, they're an agent, are going to lie and say that they are. You know, they're not working for. When I read my Clancy novels, I mean, pretty much that you're not going to tell everybody you're a spy, right? So, have you actually had a case where someone was a spy? Has in any state actually had a case where someone was a spy and lied on the affidavit like this?
I don't know if they can
That's
speak
just
to
not
that.
information that we have.
Right.
It's just not part of our duties.
Does that answer your question? Representative Spear.
We talked about this, I think, over the summer.
We have.
And unlike the other folks here, I've worked in electronic warfare for 53 years. I know the technology pretty good. I've worked for the NRO and I've worked for the DoD. So the problem I'm having with this whole thing is if we put a 10-mile radius around it, I don't believe, doesn't believe it's going to stop anything, because somebody can drive up with a truck with enough equipment to do every damage that they want, or they can come in through the internet. And so until we can have a discussion that explains the technology, which we cannot do because I don't have the clearance anymore, I don't know how we can move on this in a way that actually makes sense. Just to say that there's a problem, there's other ways to fix it. We talked about you guys getting involved with the police around your area to monitor who's in the various wooded areas around the base. And that could be a way of protecting it. There's other ways that can be done. It doesn't have to be this way. And my problem is I can't move on this until I understand why you think this is going to help in a technical sense. Because one of the things we've learned that I have had courses on, unfortunately, they send us to courses forever, is that it's a lot of human interference, that is this human intelligence, that is understanding who is working on the base and trying to get to those folks. It's through the internet. It's all kinds of different ways that these things aren't going to fix. So I need to understand more than what we just talked about. Joe, just trust me on this. Because unfortunately, I'm very technical in my background, and I need to understand what it really is. And there's no way for me to understand that.
Representative McLeod.
Thank you. Thanks for taking my question. I recognize the gentleman in the middle from Senator Birdsell's meeting. And the impression that I got from that meeting, and you and some of the other folks from New Boston spoke, was that, and you said this earlier, 10 miles, you would have wished 50 miles, 100 miles, whatever. The impression I got is this isn't really going to do anything. It's like trying to capture an elephant with a mousetrap. So would you go over that? I mean, do you really think this 10-mile limit is going to be effective at all?
So,
Thank you.
so I recognize you too, and it's nice to see you again, sir. And thank you for the question. So to be honest, I can't tell you how effective it will be, but I can tell you that spreading the cordon between the public, the uncontrolled public, and the critical operational mission that we do is better than it is worse. The further away we can push our adversaries, the better off we are. We actually have them already inside that 10 mile right now, very close to us. We won't get into the specifics of it, but legislation like this, were it in place prior to that occupation of that particular piece of real estate, possibly or probably could have prevented that.
Because they would have lied or not lied. They would have claimed, they would not have filed.
Is this a question, sir?
Yes, this is a question. Are you,
It seems like a statement. You said they would have lied. I don't know. I came here to answer your questions and provide subject matter expertise. I'm trying to do that.
Right.
It seems like the committee,
No, but I am personally always been opposed to this bill. Yes, I can't speak to other committee members, but I've let the sponsor know, and I've historically have always been opposed to this legislation. I just don't understand how this bill is supposed to work in that there is a person who is a foreign agent. Are they allowed to buy land 10 miles outside of outside of the facility? Is that permitted to buy? If I was a foreign agent, am I allowed to buy in my town of Rindge because I'm not 10 miles in here?
I think the question that you're asking is outside my area of expertise or the purpose for which I'm here, sir. But I appreciate it nonetheless.
Okay, thank you. All right, Representative Bros, yes, you may continue.
Thanks for, this is more of what would you believe? And this follows what Carrie, Representative Spear and the chair said. Has there ever been a spy in the history of the world who comes into a country and says, hey, I'm a spy? You know, I'm a Russian spy. I'm a spy from Iran. And, you know, I've only watched Mission Impossible and The Americans, but I would be really surprised if any spy worth their salt would do that.
I think the whole point of having this is so that it gives a heads up to the DOJ of New Hampshire as to who it is that's purchasing or leasing properties within that 10-mile radius of those 5 installations. That's the point. So if it's a holding company or it's, you know, person, an individual, whatever, it's to simply add a layer, just like people put fences in their yard or have security systems. It's another layer of protection, and to give a heads up to the DOJ, hey, this company just purchased property and it's within the 10-mile radius of one of these 5 installations.
Okay, Representative Herbert.
Did I hear you say that there is information that you have in your possession or have been exposed to that indicates there is actually an active somebody actively monitoring the installation?
That's correct.
So the question is, they're there anyway. And my question to I'm going to vote for this legislation, but the fact of the matter is the ability to pursue and defend is not something that I think is we should not do. In other words, you already have told us there is an agent or agency that is pursuing something that no doubt is not in our best interests. And so you've come to me with legislation that it may not be effective, but it's definitely not effective if you can't pursue your training. So there may be some issues in terms of just property, buying and selling property, but I think could be very easily fixed. So you have told me, and I have no reason to believe you're lying, that there are, in fact, today, as I sit here, people within 10 miles or something like that, and are definitely monitoring everything we do. And the fact of the matter is, if push comes to shove, you don't want to be behind the 8 ball. You want to know who's going to do and what they're going to do. I'm assuming, actually, that, and tell me if I'm wrong, I'm assuming that there is, if you have spotted some trademark or something you have seen before, and it's within our state, and I'm probably 15 miles away from your facility. I think that within our obligation and responsibility to not say no. That's it.
Fair enough. Would you believe? Yes. Yes.
Thank you for letting me ask a question. 29 states already passed legislation, and I believe Texas just approved legislation 2 days ago. So that would be 30 states. So there's definitely, we agree there's an issue. But I didn't get a chance to research all 30 states. I was looking at the Texas bill to try to figure out what they did. Obviously, if it passed in 30 states, it's constitutional. But I would like to explore what the other 30, what the remedy might have been in those other states and that legislation. Is that something that we could perhaps get an evaluation
Well, the sponsor
on?
had already done this because she had done a bill previously to this. And so that's part of the research process as well. So this bill does reflect, I think, the best practices of at the time, whatever states OLS chose to pull information out of.
And they have this is what they came up with as a solution?
No, this
No, I
was
don't-
unique. This was unique to our Attorney General came up with this idea of having anybody who buys
Oh, to do an
to
affidavit?
do an affidavit.
Oh.
This is unique. I don't know how many states have actually done that.
No, I see.
As I said to you before, well, if you just strip this thing all down and say that no foreign agent is allowed to buy, you know, because where it says no foreign principal may lease or otherwise enter into a contract to occupy or control or allow another foreign principal or agent or to lease or any real property, you know, this lease or buy. If you want to just say that and just have that sit on the books but the question would then be, so you violated the state law that you bought something that you weren't allowed to buy. What is the state going to do about it? What is the consequences? Okay. That's the problem. I mean, there are a lot of states pass crap and it has no enforceability. I mean, we know this from this committee. We see it every day. Other states pass laws that are totally unenforceable, but they do it because it feels good and they feel like they did something. But we generally don't do that in this committee. We generally only pass stuff that it actually is enforceable and actually has consequences. And in this case, the consequence is that everybody has to has to fill out something after they've closed a deal. So we're talking about renters.
Only if they're within the 2-mile radius.
Renters. I'm not talking about vacation renters. I'm talking about renters
If it's over 14 days.
who are in Manchester.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, if it's over 14
And that
days.
who can't afford to own a home. Do they even have a computer? Because you're requiring them to file within 4 days.
Well, first you had a problem when it was written. Now you're having a problem,
the problem
when it's
with the
electronic.
amendment. Yes, I'm having a problem with both. That is true. But that's
So
my job, is to
can't
show
be-
you what all.
You can't
what's
be pleased. It's really what it's-
No, I've told you. If you just want to put a stupid law that says it's illegal to buy to a foreign agent, I told you this. I said if you want to just put that bill in, I can't vote for it. But if you think that everybody wants to pass something, they feel good about that, it's illegal for a foreign agent to buy. Then
Or lease.
That's
Or
what your
lease.
amendment is going to do. I mean, yes, I will vote against it personally, but I won't speak for the members of the committee. But because to me, it's unenforceable and it's not even worth the paper it's printed on. But hey, we pass resolutions all the time, and I always vote against them because they're not worth the paper they're printed on.
Thank you for sharing.
You know, we can have a difference I'd like to understand the New Boston situation because it's right in the bailiwick that I have, and I understand that. But why on earth do we have a refueling station over here on the list? We have an area of Portsmouth Naval Shipyard that's sitting in Maine. We have a National Guard. We have none of those come up to the security level of New Boston. So I don't understand how this list was put together. They just go look for every single thing they could find?
The Department of Defense and the components that make up our national defense structure are multifaceted, and they are not all of the same criticality or mission. Excuse me.
I'd like to, if I remember correctly, in the summer, Senator Birdsell says her group was applying for it. It wasn't something that the DOD put down on us. It was something we were requesting to get all these bases put on it. And not to sound too political, but these are the same people that want to get rid of the Jones Act, which I think is much more important. So I don't understand the list. I'm sorry.
Representative Burrows.
Does it make sense? I mean, starting to go around in circles. Does it make sense to retain the bill and look at some of the laws from the 29 states to see if there's any of them that make sense and could be enforced?
Sounds like a good idea to me.
Okay, let's do it.
Is anybody else? I haven't heard from Representative Pressa. You have any comments? Yes.
Okay. So I understand the federal government is very slow, but I'm not really quite sure I totally understand the process that we're asking the state or the state attorney general to follow and how that would be faster or more effective. I just don't know what their process would be. So would they have the same timeline as the federal government? I just want to understand that a little better.
Well, I don't work for the Department of Justice, but I think I'm pretty good at saying that I'm sure our New Hampshire Department of Justice will always be faster in action than the federal government will. And so the whole point of this bill is to capture if someone is buying or leasing property within 10 miles of those installations. And so it's instantaneous. Whereas who knows if or when anyone is going to actually file with CFIUS.
Right. So we capture the data, but then it has
Then
somebody
it's up
has
to the
do
DOJ,
something.
right? It's up
So
to the
we
DOJ
don't
to
really
pursue it.
understand their time. I'm just questioning.
Right, but there's nothing in here that requires them to follow up on
anything
to see whether
within
the person
6
was lying
months
or not.
6 days.
Well,
Right.
page 2, I
Years.
believe. I don't have it. Unfortunately, I got to run to get
Yeah,
my
I have page
copy.
2.
Page 2, Class A misdemeanor or felony. I think it says that.
That's failure to submit.
Oh, for the affidavit. Yeah.
So
So
they
you're
did
saying
submit
what
it,
is
and they
the-
did submit it, and they lied
So okay.
because
so
I don't see that they can say. It doesn't say when you submit that you can say I am a foreign agent. It says it's not a foreign principal, and understands that that they were prohibited to buying that property under state law. Okay, so they understand that. They understand they were prohibited, but the AG's office. I mean, do we want to have a fiscal note to have how much it's going to cost? Is anybody here from the Attorney General's office? Okay, not today. Okay, so that theoretically they would, if we have an expectation that they're going to follow up to find out if that person is really lying, or that is truly true, or that if they are or not a foreign agent, then that's a whole other amendment to this bill. I don't know. She's got a note, so let's see what the note says.
yeah. Well, in section 3, which describes 477:22E, I believe, illegal acquisition of property by a foreign principal.
Okay.
So that is in there,
Okay.
and it does define it.
Yeah, it's a misdemeanor.
Well, it
it's committed
talks
by
about the
natural
Attorney
birth,
General's
Class B.
office.
Right. So all you're going to do is you're going to charge them with those things.
Well, it's a Class B felony when committed by an entity.
Right.
Yeah.
Theoretically, the person might be thrown in jail. You think they've maybe gone back to the home country before before before
What
that
would you like
happens?
this to say?
What
Mr.
do you
Chairman?
think? Would you think? Do you really think that's get? I mean,
Well, we can talk about, tougher, imprisoned for life. I mean, what is it that you'd like
I-
to see here?
I don't know. I don't know how. I mean, certainly, if the Attorney General's office, is I guess investigating somebody.
I would think it would go beyond if they investigate and it's determined that that
Right.
person.
They would turn it
or-
over to this gentleman, right?
Exactly.
They would turn it
go
over to
the-
you
it
and
would go to the
say,
federal level, and that person would be tried for
under
espionage.
federal. Is there federal law?
For espionage?
Is there under this?
Yes.
Is there a federal law?
Yes, your vice chair is.
No, I'm
is
asking you
saying-
about now Cigna or CFI or whatever you call it. CFIUS. Is there a federal law that if you don't disclose that you're a foreign agent and you don't disclose, is there a federal law that will throw you in jail or just basically put you on the next plane to wherever you came from?
Sir, I can't answer that question. I'm not familiar. That's not my area of expertise.
Okay.
Thank you.
I think that this bill is absolutely worth retaining just to find out what is the federal law and where we can best help facilitate that federal law. And the idea that our attorney general is going to be better at knowing when something is that the foreign agent lied, because that's really all I see here is that the foreign agent has to send a piece of paper that says that they are not a foreign agent. And at that point, the attorney general is not going to do anything about it, right? Did you guys think that our attorney general's office has got enough time and effort and will actually then find out whether the person is really telling the truth or not? All we're doing is seeing if they. So you need to have somebody else drop a dime and say, "Oh, by the way, that person really is a spy." Right? I mean, am I missing something here?
Well, I would hope that the DOJ would follow through.
Do right? No, that's what I'm saying. There's, I mean, we had this accusation that right now when you do a co-op or a condo, that under our statute that you file your condo bylaws and regulations with the Attorney General's office. And there's been some accusation. Now, this is one of the reasons why I was happy to get rid of this bill out of our committee, that the AG's office just sticks it in a file box and never looks at them.
Well, I would hope state security and hence federal security is a lot more important than the bylaws of a condo association.
And we're more than ready to add more money to the AG's budget to do that. Representative Thaxton.
I'm going to put this sort of in the category of a would you believe, and if you find something that you don't believe, let me know what it is. So CFIUS is actually run out of the Department of the Treasury. However,
Secret Service.
correct. However, it is largely concerned with the acquisition of farmland, and according to the American Farm Bureau, which is run by the Department of Agriculture, and the Secretary of Agriculture is one of the members of the committee. In 2022, nationwide, we had slightly under 300 what they call notices. Of the 300 notices, the majority were withdrawn. More than half, about 2/3 were withdrawn, which isn't to say that the other third weren't valid. Probably in Maine, from what I understand. So that's the first part of the would you believe. And the second thing that, when I look at that, I recall the fact that when you sell land, there's a federal form that you have to fill out that says, I'm not a bad person from one of these countries. And it occurs to me that if somebody bought a large piece of land within your 10 acres, they may have fibbed on that form. Because that's already a requirement in federal law, and we already have that when you close on a transaction that involves a large piece of land. So
Right,
just
but
saying,
this is going to be if you just buy a house, or you're
Well,
renting,
you're adding that to the
you're
collection
renting-
of forms that
you're
nobody
renting a
enforces.
condo.
Correct. Anyway, that, would you believe those things are actually already there, and that's as far as I'm gonna go with it. I understand the intent, I just don't think it's gonna work.
Okay, Representative Spear,
I'm still
Last
alive
summer
over
when
here,
we-
by the way.
would you still have another?
Yes, I've been doing what I can. I think I should have a flag.
I can. I'm looking at the person speaking. So if I'm doing that, you just need to send a note down to me that you would like to speak again. But
Okay, should I have them pre-printed?
sure. Would you like a pad of paper to pre-print it?
I've said something once.
Well, and I really have to admit, I had not really sure what I got out of what you were asking or saying before, other than that you agreed with the bill that you want to pass the bill. I did hear that.
Yeah, well, and you disagree. And,
Obviously.
And I asked, I got an answer for my question, and,
Yes.
and the answer was, yes, there is somebody that is actually doing what he's talking about. And you apparently don't believe him. I grew up on military installations,
Uh-huh.
okay? So, you don't, to say, oh, well, why should we do anything like this? Because, we're not going to be aware of it because, it's stupid. And I don't think it's stupid.
I
actually.
hear you. You
And
think
if
it's a good
somebody
idea.
tells me that he knows he has somebody.
In his,
or-
they've got
okay,
someone
and you
figured
could
out.
say, well,
So the question is, what have you done about it? What have they done about this person?
he may,
Why
not,
have
want, he may
ha-
not want to tell us.
no? That is the biggest problem with this legislation to begin with, is that we don't really know what they're doing. We don't. Well, all we know is they're one of 8 that monitors satellites. That's all we know.
Well, I think he wants to do something that's legal and that tells people in this state that there is an issue here and we've
Right.
addressed it.
And you believe our Attorney General's office, if they had this in law on the books, we would be able to do something about that person.
I don't know. I'm not a lawyer, but I do know that if somebody tells me who is actually in the job that there is a problem, I'm going to take his word for it.
Fair enough. I agree with you. I don't question whether that they're going to do something about it. I just wonder why haven't they? I mean, why where's
Well,
where's
we're not
the
gonna do-
Treasury Department to go in there, the
We're
Secret
not
Service
going
to
to
go
do
in there?
something about it.
The
That's
Secret
very
Service
clear.
should be doing something about it, don't you think?
I
Based
think
upon what I
this-
just
think
heard.
we
But
should-
go ahead, Representative Spear.
Last year, when we were talking about the original of this bill, I looked up the law at the federal level, and I have the papers on that, and it's within 100 miles of an active military base, the kind of base that these folks work on, not the National Guard stuff, and not a refueling station, but
Right.
within 100 miles of a active military base. The federal government is supposed to review it and force them to sell. That's what the result is. Nobody goes to jail. They just force them to sell and kick them out. It's a direct result of that thing that happened in, I think it was South Dakota.
Yeah, I thought it was
It's a
South
direct
Dakota.
result of
That's
that.
what I thought was South Dakota.
So
yeah.
there is that law in the books, and I can bring in the papers on that. If that,
Right. So that the consequence is that the person is
they're forced to sell.
first to sell and then leave the country, or obviously, or
Oh, didn't say they have to leave the country. They may. I
well, if they're
know
a
what they do.
spy, don't they? Don't we put them on a plane?
I don't know who we let in
I
the
mean, we
country.
have a lot of planes flying out, taking people out of the country. But
And do understand that these list of bases that are on here, the only active base, as these folks have said, is the New Boston. The others are not active military bases.
I hear you.
And they don't go running around looking at satellites.
Well, I don't think that that's the issue. I think that the issue is that the Department of Defense and maybe some other groups, organizations, have determined that those 5 areas are of importance in New Hampshire.
They did because Senator Birdsell asked them to. They did not initiate it. I was there over the summer when she said she was asking them for it. So I don't know how you categorize that. I mean, if this bill was limited to New Boston, maybe I could swallow it. But the way it is now, I can't.
Okay, so I'm looking at who's on this committee. We have Keith is not here. And you're on it. Yeah, everybody else is on it. So that's Hunt, Patusek, Thaxton, Herbert, McAleer, Spear, and Salvi. Okay, so Representative,
I just want to make one comment before.
yes,
As the bill intention is definitely good, but I really don't know when we fill up a form, what DOJ is going to do with it, how long it will take, who is responsible. We don't have any idea, so I'm going to go against the bill.
okay, so what the motion is going to be is Representative Burrows, seconded by Representative Hunt, is to retain this bill so that we can keep working on it to address the issues that we have discussed and really get our arms around what's the consequence, what's the things.
Can I
And-
do that because I'm not on the subcommittee?
You want to take my place?
What it?
Sure.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't, your name is on there. Okay.
But don't you want to vote?
Oh, you're right. You get, so Representative Spear makes the motion.
Okay.
Sorry. And Representative Patusek will second it. Okay. Representative Spear, seconded by Representative Patusek, moves to retain. Is the question clear? All those in favor of retaining, please raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And those opposed?
Anti-crypto, but I want something on the books.
So you are opposed to retaining it?
Yeah.
Okay. 6-1. All right. Thank you very much. Okay. Oops. Just did the wrong.
I'm just don't like the idea that say
All right.
it won't work because they'll lie to us. Of course they're gonna lie to us.
What the other 30 states did something. It's a problem. It is a problem.
You put somebody 10 miles away.
6. We have the amendment.
Anywhere along there and disrupt. They can do that from a charter. So this is not gonna stop the freaking thing. That's why the feds made it
I think
100 miles.
you
Because that's
think
the.
you should be aware. You should be aware of.
Well, I'm not supposed to. They can interfere there. They can interfere with this anywhere along between 100 and 200 miles. What's the elephant in the mousetrap?
The flip side of it is making sure people, if they know where they are, and they know they're there, 2 miles.
That's why I thought the police should be policing the area.
Well, if they know they're sitting there, they've already got federal statutes to shut them down. So it doesn't make sense.
Part of the problem is that a lot of it is done over the internet. And they can be in China, they can be anywhere. That's how VA Systems was killed, over the internet. Had nothing to do with being anywhere near them.
They're shutting down the power grid or.
They don't even have to be in the country. I wouldn't be surprised if it's some Chinese organization or whatever, sitting there banging on it from the internet, which is not stoppable. They can stop it, but VA Systems, they disconnect.
Okay. Okay, so So 20. 1, 2, 3. Okay. 26. We still hear you. Okay. Okay. All right. So, for those who care about this bill, how's it look? How's this amendment look?
I think it looks better.
Good.
Looks perfect.
Well, you know, I want to make sure everybody's. I've covered all my bases. And speaking of Texas, the Texas legislature meets once every 2 years. Oh, wow. And they meet for 2 months.
And I bet they get paid.
Oh, they get paid. Yeah, they definitely get paid because it's a long way to do. Because they get a lot in district offices because they live so far away. Every 2 years. We used to be biannual ourselves. And it was when we had the constitutional. That was the last time we had a constitutional convention, and it was just before I came in that they started going to annual sessions, and the issue was that they so often they actually did have a second session. And it was, the process. There's the process. The governor called. We would come back, and it was always one of the hot items was it was always the budget. You always had to revisit the budget. The idea that we do a 2-year budget and then not have to look at it for 2 years is almost impossible.
Yeah.
But so okay. So there is nobody has a problem with this amendment. Okay.
Want a motion?
Yes.
I move that we pass, ought to pass as amended.
Okay. And second by Representative Patusek. Oh, sorry. Second by Representative Salvi. Okay, this is ought to pass on the amendment. And the amendment number is 1976.
It's a very good year.
Right. Where were you for the bicentennial? I did it intentionally. I wanted to be on Starro Drive. I wanted to be walking on Starro Drive. I figured they closed it.
Oh.
For Boston.
Oh.
So I thought that had to be a place, how often are you going to get into walk on Starro?
I was in Washington and Nelson Rockefeller was vice president.
Yeah.
And that's the only thing, he was in the parade because somebody else had something better to do.
Yeah, right. Gerald Ford.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So is the question clear? The motion is ought to pass on the amendment? Okay. All those in favor, please raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7-0. Okay. Representative Thaxton. Second by Representative Salvi. Moves ought to pass as amended. Okay. Is the question clear? Is the question clear? All those in favor of ought to pass as amended, please raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Zip. Okay. All right. Next is homeowners prohibition certain types of service agreements. Yeah. So first, there's some people up back there are going to want one of those. Okay. He's a cutter, you're a dam provider. Into or offer to enter into a prohibition. Looks good to me. You okay with it? Yeah.
Good morning, members of the committee. For the record, my name is Mike Padmore. I'm the Director of Advocacy with AARP New Hampshire. So we think this amendment looks really good. In just looking through it and talking with some of the other parties, specifically Mr. Quinn and the realtors, I think there's just one change that we would suggest just to provide some additional clarity and sort of clean it up just a little bit.
Okay.
In the first section, letter A, for the first definition, rather than calling this prohibition in listing, what Mr. Quinn and I thought was calling that prohibited listing agreements just makes more sense. And then to just change that definition, basically keeping it as means a contract or agreement between a provider and an owner under which the owner agrees to list the owner's residential real estate for sale, and then strike the rest of it and then just put "and that contains any of the terms or requirements set forth in section 2 below." So it effectively is saying a prohibited listing agreement is keeping that first section, but then any of these 4 requirements that are listed in section 4 just makes it very clean.
Okay. So, you're going to read it again? Yes.
I've got a question.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Thank you. On the second page, lines like 4 through 6 or 4 through 7, if this agreement is prohibited and illegal, why would somebody have to petition a superior court? I find that redundant.
No, thank you for the question. So one of the things that we talked about in the hearing and then in the prior work session that the registrars came and testified to is that if they are presented with one of these agreements to record, they don't have the statutory ability to refuse those agreements, and so they have to record those. And so, effectively, what this section is just giving that individual recourse. The bill would say that that agreement, whether or not it is recorded or not, is unenforceable by the nature of this law. What this section is doing is then allowing for that individual to effectively remove it from their title and get that clarity from the court.
Yeah.
Don't
Yeah.
understand why they would need to go to, I don't understand.
Well,
why
there
they would need to
basically
go to
is what
court.
happens just because we said it's illegal. What happens if the person that nobody stops them from doing it? Okay, they've already done it, and then they run down and record it at the register. The register, we don't have a system to say, oh, never mind. that this statute, this paragraph is in there, and just as a what do they call boots and straps, to straps and suspenders to making sure that if it did occur, then we have a process to get it off the books. Representative Thackston's next.
Thank you. I have
Keep
a
an eye
couple
over
of
here.
questions. This idea of this whole thing troubles me deeply. So if I say something that sounds like I think, gee whiz, we should be doing this, that is not the case. But my questions are maybe a little more technical in nature. I'm not sure why this wouldn't be considered a net listing and regulated under 404, number one. Number two, it's not clear to me that in the execution of one of these agreements, the person executing the agreement shouldn't be subject to regulation or requirements to have a real estate license. I would view this as a prohibited act by a non-licensee. I think you could make a solid case for that, but I would think that maybe it should be added or specified in the under 331 that this is this kind of activity, whatever however you want to define this, should be regulated. In order to execute this document, you must have a real estate license. In New Hampshire, we require that timeshare salesmen have real estate licenses. I'm not sure why you wouldn't need, if, we could have a special class for scammers or something, If you're a scammer, you have to have a real estate license. And it seems to me, yeah, scamming license. And so those are my concerns. I think it's really in effect a net listing. And the other concern I would have would be under 404, you have to specify the time, the beginning and end dates of your contract. That's applied under the statute of frauds. And when I look at 404, it doesn't have a statutory limit. So I could have a 50-year listing agreement, which I would think a court might strike down as invalid and unreasonable, but it doesn't say that in the law. And so perhaps another aspect of this would be to restrict the period of time. In teaching real estate school for a decade, we typically said that real estate listing agreements were, and I believe there was a court decision someplace, but I can't reference it, that a listing agreement for greater than a year is not permissible. So those are concerns. I don't think there's anything wrong with this, but I think it should, A, be clearly stated that this is a net listing, B, that it is, if you're doing this, it must be done by a real estate licensee, and perhaps there's other aspects of this law that should be addressed.
Let me. So we actually addressed a lot of these issues in the previous subcommittee, and what the issue was is that yes, there was one or two, it was some say 1, 2, but what we were saying is we just don't think it's should happen at all.
I agree.
Going back to your piece, so let's go back to that piece. And my initial thought was this belongs in the Real Estate Act.
Yeah.
Okay, and that can't see the speaker is in my way, but that Bob and I went back and forth on this conversation. But that the problem was that the people who were actually trying to do this
Are not licensed.
are not even licensed. So my as you know, I'm tend to want to kill bills because I don't like less especially bills that I don't even know how well it's going to get enforced and when it's regulated. But what we said is, okay, given that now this concept of doing something like this
Yep.
is out there, okay, that it's like the people who jump off the bridge. One or two jump off, and then before you know it, you've got a third. I mean, it's catchy, okay. So the idea was, let's just make sure we put in the books that, and we narrowed it down because we didn't like the original way it was said service contracts, which was really, didn't say anything about what we were really trying to address. So we were looking at the main statute. It said, okay, let's work from that, is because it's narrowed to just this subject matter. We didn't want to put the 1 or 2 years in it because we want to say it's just plain illegal. Period. Don't even think about doing it. Okay. And yes, we had to make it so that it wasn't necessarily whether it was you were a licensed agent or not, because for all intents and purposes, we agree that a real estate agent wouldn't do this in the first place. Okay. It's only a sleazeball who's I guess is that they're an internet listing company that lists them, and they were just looking at a way to get people to sign up. And I assumed that they would give the person a check, or give them, there would be something, I'm sure. Well, it's very small, right? 300 or 3,000, who knows? But so I don't know but unfortunately, as AARP came in and said that sometimes people were they don't really understand the consequence of what they just signed. And so therefore we said, okay, let's pass this very narrow, very specific prohibition. That's how we got to this place.
I mean, I'm good with what it is, but I think
Yeah,
there's
it's
other places.
exactly. It would have been nice to do it in a different place. This is the idea that we're sticking this under the Consumer Protection Act.
Yeah.
So, as someone who the Consumer Protection Act has been very important. We haven't had too much in this committee over the years, but at one point in time, we had 6 watershed bills all at one time when it came to the Consumer Protection Act, and that was about who was exempt from it, and who was in and who was out. And at one point in time, realtors wanted to be in, and then they realized that they really didn't want to be in.
No.
And
But
so
we're in now.
no, you're not. Yeah, you're in you're in the Consumer Protection Act, not getting the exemption.
Right,
Okay.
yeah, yeah.
So if you look at the Consumer Protection Act, okay, and you can see this one is 16A. So there's numerous items in there, and it goes from how long you can run going out of business sale. It's all kinds of
I've been going out of business since 1960.
right. So there's a myriad of things. So that it does seem appropriate that we would stick it in there, and that this, because it's really not anything related to a real estate license. It is because real estate agents would never do this. It is doing this is dealing with the fly-by-nights, which is what the Consumer Protection Act. So, Representative Spear.
Michael, I guess we get Mr. Padmore. You were saying that we should change the definition and replace prohibition and listing. You gave me a very concise definition in the email, and it was much more concise and to the point than what you just said.
Yeah.
So my recommendation is you use the definition in the email.
Okay.
So what I originally had sent over to you was we had struck everything. Let's see. So it means a contract or agreement between a provider and an owner, and then we had struck under which to sale. And then actually, when I was just chatting with Mr. Quinn, we think it does make sense to leave that from under which the owner agrees to list the owner's residential real estate for sale. And what's important about that is that makes this very clear. This is about residential real estate being listed for sale. And then we would say, and that contains any of the terms or requirements set forth in section 2 below. I think that just makes it very clear about what this is, what these agreements are.
Did we get all that?
Okay, so let's read it.
I'm happy
to
to
me
follow
again.
up and
read
send
read
that.
it to me again, please.
Of course. So it would be Roman 1A, prohibited listing agreements.
Okay, just stop right there. Prohibited listing, I'm dyslexic, so it takes me a little longer. Prohibited listing agreements.
Means a contract or agreement between a provider and an owner under which the owner agrees to list the owner's residential real estate for sale. And then we would strike the remaining part of that definition.
I thought you had something about for sale under the following.
Right. So for sale, and then we would strike the remainder. So we would strike with
With a
the
provider which requires a lien. You're
right.
striking
we would
that.
strike that, and we would replace that with and that contains any of the
and
terms
contains-
or requirements set forth.
Just
in-
slow down.
Sure,
Slow
sure.
down. And contains any.
Of the terms.
Any, sorry, after any, what was after any?
any of the terms
Of the terms
or requirements
or requirements
set forth in section 2 below.
set forth below. Low. And say, but as for in section 2.
Correct.
Okay.
And then there are 10 instances where the phrase prohibition and listing is in the amendment. And so obviously we would strike and replace that with prohibited listing agreements so that it's consistent.
You get that, Kristen? She's better than I am. Right? I mean, and that's what you want, right, Bob? Okay. Any questions to the committee members? So we will need to come back with this bill also. No, actually, yeah. No, we won't. This is the only one we're coming back for then. Right, because we're going to retain. Okay. Okay. So we're not going to take any votes yet because we'll wait until we have the official amendment. We'll just say we review
Thank you.
amendment number 2088. Okay? Everybody else set? All right. That ends our subcommittee work session for today. Next week. Okay.